All right. Well, howdy, neighbors. We are visiting today with my good friend Mickey Abraham from down in the Sunshine State of Florida. He lives in Tallahassee. And how you doing, Mickey?
Chris, I'm doing well. It's really nice to see you, my friend.
Good to see you too. We've been knowing each other for, I guess, maybe going on almost 20 years.
Yeah, I would say possibly over 20 years if we actually try to get right down to it. It's been a long time.
Yeah. And we met at the Florida Folk Festival because you rode with my grandmother Renee and a couple of folks from Tallahassee over to White Springs. And then we realized that we had a common interest in plant medicine and playing the mandolins. And that was how we got to know each other, wasn't it?
That's exactly right. We actually became friends before I realized that I had ridden down with your grandmother.
That's
And
right.
then
It's like, oh, yeah, I rode down with your grandmother.
it came out in conversation. I think I rode to the festival with your grandma.
That's right. I was Renee, my dad's mom, and she was a big supporter of the Florida Folk Festival and a Tallahassee lassie for a long time. Are you from Tallahassee? I can't even remember.
I'm from South Florida, and I came here to go to college in the 90s and
Hmm.
ended up getting hardcore into the folk scene. Started working for Gordon in college, and that kind of set my life in that direction hardcore. Just I definitely feel like a Tallahassee local at this point.
Hardcore into the folk scene. Now that could be a lengthy discussion in itself. What is that like?
What is that like? Well, it was different back then. We know back in the 90s, no Facebook, no YouTube. We met people the real way. We made connections at festivals, had to go to the festival to learn the tunes, had to go there to meet people. It was definitely a different world back then. But in college, I started working for a guy named Gordon Scott, who I know you know, Gordon and Jane, kind of Tallahassee bluegrass legends, and they were just so kind and so they got me so into the music that from that point, just working for them for a year, and I'd already met all of Gordon's folk music friends, and like
Gordon
your
played with
father,
Crow, didn't he?
pardon me,
Gordon played with J.D. Crow, didn't he?
he sure did.
Yeah, up in Lexington, I believe.
He sure did. He introduced me to your father, and introduced me to a ton of great musicians. And I met Liz and Lon Williamson through him. Met Gabe Fowler through him. Met pretty much you. I think we kind of found each other at the festival that one day. But I certainly got introduced to your music. Gordon's like, oh, listen to Red Henry and Chris play the mandolin. Definitely set me in that direction. Back then, I met so many people, and it was such a scene that was so inviting back then. I never looked back. I've been kind of working out of that scene ever since.
Yeah, the Florida folk scene is a pretty special community, and definitely been that way since I guess the very beginning. But at least you know, as far as like my connection to the legacy going back, I guess to the mid '60s, late '60s, and then I heard it got so big at one point that they just had like tens of thousands of people coming to it. They had to like change the weekend to maybe shake some of the the the, the, the undesirables. I hate to say that because I'd probably be fitting in with the undesirables from time to time. Change the weekend so that they could have a little more tidy uh, crowd.
Totally. I feel like you have really done a great job coming out of the Florida folk scene as well with what you've done with your mandolin career and musical career. It's really been a fun to watch over the past 20 years, man.
Well, I appreciate that. We moved up to Florida. We moved out of Florida in '86, and then I guess the first festival I ever played was the Florida Folk Festival in I guess 1991 or so, and then I started coming down with my dad in 2000, I think, and playing with Dale Kreider. And yeah, it's a bit of a mecca. Beautiful trees, the Swanee River there, lots of kind of synchronous spiritual activity happening there, and kind of the interesting Stephen Foster legacy. I'm not sure he ever made it down to that neck of the woods, but he's got that connection going there too. Let's talk about your writing a little bit. So you've been writing in different publications for a long time. How did you get started doing that?
It's a very fortunate thing I fell into. I met do you know Dan Miller from Flat Picking
I
Magazine?
do. I've just been getting to know Dan a little bit since he has taken over Bluegrass Unlimited editing.
That's right. He tried to get out of the magazine business, and then it sucked him in even more. Now he's doing Bluegrass Unlimited.
Yeah, he's doing a good
I
job.
met Dan 15 years ago now. It's been forever ago, and I got really hooked up. Well, he did a little article about my teaching and playing, which I'm still really fortunate about getting that, because flat picking is such a small niche. To get into the magazine was really exciting back then. That's already, gosh, 13 years ago probably.
Mhm.
And he gave me this one little job. He's like, "Hey, will you write an article for the newsletter?" And that was the just to help sell his material, his books, his back order catalog, and we'll put a little free lesson there. But what I didn't realize is that that would be like a regular column, and I would do that. And not only that, it's kind of more accessible than the magazine, because you don't even have to subscribe to the magazine to get the newsletter. So more people are even subscribed to the newsletter than the actual magazine. So all this stuff goes free online. So over the past 12 years, all these tabs, all these music articles, as you would say, they got put online, and people find them all the time. I didn't realize that would be such an amazing in back then. I thought it would be like a one-off thing,
Mhm.
or never even realizing that people that weren't even looking for my material would stumble upon it, because friends of mine like John Stickley will be like, "I wonder how to play, I don't know, a tune." I'm trying to think of the one he found. It was dun, 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 Little Rock Getaway. He was trying to pick out some
Oh,
melody to Little Rock Getaway, and he searched it up, and my tablature came up first. And I have that experience a lot over the years of people searching for tunes on Google and coming across my flat pick and guitar magazine stuff.
right on. So let's talk about your newer projects. You've got the folk opera in the process now. How's that? Let's talk. I want you to introduce people to that concept and tell people what's been going on with that.
Awesome. Yeah, I've been playing for 10 years with my friend Catherine Bell, who we've picked together at festivals. Total amazing songwriting, award-winning songwriter. We've won Emmy Awards together, and she won the Best Florida Song 2018. So after winning a few awards together, we had this lofty idea of writing a concept album, which is not too foreign to us. We're really into Disney music, as you probably noticed through the years. Sometimes I've played you songs even 5 years ago, and you're like, sounds like Disney.
Hmm.
Hopefully in the best way possible. But in addition to all the hot licks and stuff like that, I'm also really drawn to stuff like epic compositions and beautiful melodies, TV theme songs, Disney music, Broadway music, any kind of music really. So it's Pink Floyd, Jesus Christ Superstar, anything like that. So we wrote this folk opera together, and we actually raised $40,000 on a Kickstarter to record it. This was before COVID. So it's been a long road trying to get it done, but we're still working on it steadily, and it sounds amazing, man. It's really cool. I get to do so many different kind of things with it than anything I've ever done before with any recording project. It's entirely different. Playing lots of guitar and mandolin, lots of layers. It's totally opposite of playing live in the studio and just taking a solo over a fiddle tune.
Hmm.
It couldn't be more opposite than that. But I like all that stuff too. So it's kind of like pushing my ear in a totally new direction of almost like I don't want to play any extra notes. And you're a player that's like that too. To me, even even when you're playing a fiddle tune, you always play notes that matter, and you always play beautiful melodies. And you're always more of a melody person and notes that matter way more than just plastering hot licks over a tune. And that's something that I've admired about your playing for decades. That to me, you stand above so many other players when it comes to what notes not to play.
Well, I appreciate that. I get mixed reviews, but I definitely aim for that. So talk about some of the highlights of the creation, process, some of the things that went smoothly, and some of the challenges, because there are always so many unexpected challenges when you're making an album. I kind of definitely go along with the maxim or the idea that you're ready to make the album when you're done making the album.
Wow, right. That's exactly it. I can relate to that exactly. Like if I could start doing it now, I would record every song differently. Um, it's 2 hours long. We're almost done recording all 2 hours of it. We're still yet to do some sound effects. It's been a really smooth process because the people that we're working with have been unbelievably talented and dedicated and positive. The the challenging part, Chris, has not been actually the music or the recording. It's been real life. Catherine's mom passed away this past year. My mother passed away this past year. Our friend who you know, Mike Snelling, passed away, who was the bass player for Bell and the band. He passed away right before COVID. And all of this has nothing to do with even COVID itself. So having all the festivals and gigs and the whole world kind of shut down, and as we all experienced, but that was like just life in general. 2020 happened and our own personal lives happened, and that stuff has been kind of tough to stay focused. But if it wasn't for the folk opera, I don't even know if how we would have even kept going forward through some of that stuff, you know?
Yeah, I did not know that your mom had passed away. I'm so sorry, brother.
Thanks,
I
Chris.
don't know how I missed that. That's the worst. But as you say, um, if anything can lift our spirits up, it's doing some of the things that the people that love us the most in life would want us to be doing, uh, and to be able to just kind of go full tilt into the creative zone, can provide healing in some of those moments. So I'm glad that's been there for you, but I'm just really sorry I didn't know about that. Um,
Thanks.
so 2 hours long. That is an epic folk opera.
It's completely epic on every level. We're going all out. It's super cool, man. We got all original characters, original storyline. We're working with an artist out of Los Angeles who does a lot of work with movies and TV, and he's doing all the scenes and all the characters in a certain style. It's gonna be really cool. So it'll be the same length as a full movie or a full play. And if it doesn't get turned into a full length movie, maybe it will be. And if not, it'll certainly put Catherine and I into a different category, of what we're doing. I hope when people say, "What's Mickey been up to?" they can say he constantly pushes himself to try new creative endeavors.
Yeah, 2 hours in length. Will that even fit on a CD?
Probably not one CD. It's going to
That's
be quite, yeah,
Yeah, maybe a two CD set.
plus vinyl and thumb drive versions.
Ah, very good. Very good. So when you're thinking about a project of that magnitude, how did you get started? Was it just like kind of like, oh, it'd be cool to do a 2 hour long folk opera, or was it like, you just kind of had ruminations of energy and creative kind of, like wisps of like concepts that kind of like slowly congealed into the full concept?
More the latter. I think we had no idea what we were getting into when we first came up with the concept. Surprisingly, for Catherine and I together, it's actually, I don't want to say it's easy, because it's a challenging thing. But the way our brains work, the way my brain works, it's kind of like since high school, I've been messing around with certain parts that I thought would make a great concept album of sorts. So it's almost like going back to my 16-year-old guitar world, stealing parts and ideas from listening to Pink Floyd and Led Zeppelin and epic albums like that. So in that sense, it's almost been super easy and fun. But as basically, Catherine is a brilliant songwriter. She gives me a song with chords and lyrics and beautiful melodies. She writes most of the storyline, and I'll challenge her. She'll come and I'll be like, "Well, what is this character thinking? Why is this character doing this? Why do we care about what this character does?" Classic, what people would do in the writing room. And sometimes she would be able to answer exactly, well, here's why the character is singing the song, and this is what's going on. And sometimes I would challenge her to the point where she might question, like, I'm not sure. And that will get her to kind of think about the arc of each character, what's happening story wise. And for the music, I get to arrange her songs. So for example, I don't know if we want to do any playing, but you know, it's so interesting to take,
Sure.
to give an example. I'll just a quick musical example. If Catherine were to give me a song with two chords that goes like an A to a D, and she's got some killer lyrics, and there's nothing wrong with a 1/4 groove, I'll come up with a part behind it like this. and thousands of those little ways of going from A to D that are not hot licks, but I think are memorable little passages. And that's what her songs are so easy to do that to, because you've played with a million people. Some songwriters, their songs don't make any sense. You know, they have no particular good form. Um, and I'll give you an example of that too. Have you ever had someone who does a song like this, Chris? There's a 1 and a 4 and a 5 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 and a 1. They're like, you take a break. And I'm like, what? Because it might
Yeah.
be a simple chords, but they come in a very illogical way that doesn't seem like it rolls off so easily, you know? And
Yeah.
Catherine does the opposite. She writes beautiful chord progressions and beautiful melodies.
Some people might think that's folky, but maybe it's not so folky if, like,
It's very folky, and it totally follows the words. The person that does that is thinking of it from a vocal perspective, and they don't even realize why that might be more challenging to take a break over, because they think the chords are simple. But if they change in unnatural places, it becomes really challenging.
Yeah, I guess I meant from a user-friendly folk kind of stance.
Right.
Yeah. So, once you got the album done, what happens then?
Yeah, with COVID and everything, I'm so skeptical about doing the live show. I don't want to do it with any kind of weird mandates of any kind. I don't want to do it where anyone is scared of coming. So right now, as far as the live performance of it, I have no plans on doing it anytime soon. Like right now, it's going to be more of a listening experience, and then once the full album is done, we'll tackle the live show. But we have plenty of ideas and plenty of places to play the live show. A lot of our festival promoter friends donated it to our Kickstarter. They already put in their share to have the folk opera performed in its entirety. Like the folks over at the Swanee, they put it on the Kickstarter. Our friends at Baygrass and the Keys put it on the Kickstarter. So we'll be able to perform it around Florida and maybe even get it out to a couple places outside of Florida. It's going to be a little tough because our cast has kids, wives, and jobs. Some of our friends who are singing the parts. It's not all Catherine and I singing on it and playing on it. We
Hmm.
have really talented friends playing and singing on it. So to get them all together, my idea is to do maybe like 3 or 4 folk opera shows within a week, and we'll be able to get them all to pull them away from their kids and families and jobs for at least a week and take it on the road a little bit for realistically. But the listening part of the album is probably more of what I'm concentrating on right now, just making that the best it can possibly be.
Yeah, for sure. It's nice to have enough time to refine it and let it marinate, and for more inspiration to happen, and for that kind of the maturation process that can happen when you record something, and then uh, you might not necessarily like it, or you might love it, and then that can change in a day or a week. David Greer had a good line about some stuff, like that maybe goes down a little raw can heal after a while, and then it'll start to sound better to you. But it's nice not to be rushed through the process, for sure.
You're so prepared for cool questions to ask me, and when we were talking about doing this conversation, I was saying, do you want me to possibly ask you questions too? Because your playing and your teaching style has fascinated me for years. The idea that we met as friends at the folk festival, but your playing to me is so mesmerizing, and every time we pick together, you leave me baffled on what the beep you're doing. And I've never met anyone who has any kind of take on playing mandolin or music. I don't even want to say bluegrass or mandolin. Just your take on music is so unique, so polished and world class, but yet at the same time so rough and ready. It's like a combination of just so many interesting punk rock and metal elements mixed with obviously Bill Monroe mandolin, a complete mastery of note for note Bill, but yet putting your own stamp on it. It's blowing me away, and I couldn't even begin to like imagine like what goes on in your musical mind, man.
Well, that's very kind of you. There is a lot of, as probably most of the folks that would be watching the video, Facebook friends and YouTube folks would know who Bill Monroe is. And what he did, to change the world, he was the big bridge between the old time world and the country blues kind of melting pot, and what became rock and roll, and he was the really, perhaps the first one to really cross the or to bridge the race gap, with music in the 40s. Talking about, bringing the blues and the jazz thing a little bit, more the blues than the jazz, but into the country fold. And he did that very, very uh, adeptly and cautiously, and maybe not cautiously, but cleverly. And anyway, so he was just so immensely powerful that he changed the world, in a big way, and paved the way for rockabilly and Elvis Presley. Of course, Elvis recorded a Bill Monroe song on his the B side of his very first record, and I'm not telling you anything that you don't know, but all that to say is that he was very powerful, and the universe chose him to hold that power and to be able to ground it and sustain it for a very long time. He was still playing on into his 80s, and the archetypal significance of his creative force and the gravity. Gravity is a really good word when you talk about Bill Monroe and bluegrass. And you could say, who invented bluegrass? It's like, well, it was a bit of a collective effort, but Bill Monroe seemed to be the one that collected it. He was the one that got it all going and had it in his band, and then of course the genre was named after the band. But all that to say is that there was just an immense amount of gravity, and you could call it a lot of different things. Cultural gravity, for sure. You could call it spirituality. Of course, Bill was really into the Jesus, and that could be its own discussion. But he was a person of faith and talent and power, musical power. He's a very powerful physical person. He was also a very powerful musician. And when you study a musician like that, and it could be, there aren't too awful many of them, that had that kind of gravity. You're talking about folks that are in the league of like Louis Armstrong, Bill Monroe, Elvis. You could go with Bob Marley, perhaps Jerry Garcia, like cultural magnets, and then you could get into the modern world, and you could probably find some folks like Michael Jackson, or for better and worse, but just that have this kind of huge gravity to what they're doing musically. And if you just spend the right amount of time in the right way, and you have some modicum of talent that can be grown. I was lucky to grow up in it, for better and worse. That can be kind of a uh, you know that can work for you, and that can work against you. But it's been mostly working for me, and I just fell in love with it, and I got obsessed with the channel of power that you can tap into using, because it's largely folk music. It's a G and a C and a D, and every now and then an A. It's not like very complicated music, but it's played at such a level of he was a virtuoso. Earl Scruggs was a virtuoso. All the early cats were. Chubby Wise was a virtuoso. Whoever's playing the bass was some kind of virtuoso. He was making it. Maybe not, but Lester Flatt. All these guys. At the highest level, and it's never been surpassed. And it won't be surpassed for what it was. And that's when you get into the whole like cultural relevance thing. It's like you can't do bluegrass theater and expect it to have the same gravity, impact, freshness as it did when it was new. But one of my favorite, this is one of my favorite stories. Just thinking about this, what is going on with Bill Monroe. And I'd invite all the listeners in the audience that are under the age of 18 to turn off to fast forward the the video here for about 2 minutes while I tell this story. Of course they won't, but you got to say that. So Butch Robbins, who was one of the most interesting figures in bluegrass music. He was a banjo player, is a banjo player from Southwest Virginia. Played with Bill in the '70s, early '80s. Um, he was one of the psychedelic bluegrass boys, and I remember my uncle John Hedgecock said he went to a festival one time. He was friends with Butch, and well, I don't know if I should tell that story, but I'll tell a story that is in his book called "What I Know About." I think it's called "What I Know About What I Know," and I think he had let's see, how do we clean this up for YouTube? He was participating in some uh, uh, culturally um, co- common mind expanding experiments on stage at the Grand Ole Opry, and and he said he turned over to Bill Monroe, and he looked at Bill Monroe, and Bill Monroe turned into a dragon. So, and I've definitely, um, through my own meditations, connected Bill Monroe with that dragon force, with the dragon energy, the great Kentucky dragon, the blue Kentucky dragon. I wrote Butch one time to ask him what color the dragon was, but I didn't get a reply. Might try again one day. But so it's a very, very intense fire that's in bluegrass, and Peter Rowan talks about you get close to that fire, and then you can start to make your own fire. And
Are
so
you still playing with Peter?
yeah, matter of fact, I'm leaving. I haven't seen him in a long time, over a year and a half. Can't even remember actually the last time. It was Merlefest 20. Can't remember. But anyway, I'm leaving on Wednesday to go up to Minnesota. We're playing the Boats and Bluegrass Festival up there,
Wonderful.
and then we're going to record his new album, which he at one point had asked me to co-produce with him. I'm not sure if that's still on the table or not, but we'll find out when I get up there. And
Do, do folks out there know how you met Peter and how he ended up asking you to record and play with him?
I'm not really sure if that's kind of like what people know. I kind of met him briefly near my hometown of Winchester and Berryville when Mike Bubb was trying to get me to play mandolin in the Peter Rowan and Tony Rice band, but that didn't happen because they had gotten, I guess, Ricky Simpkins was playing fiddle or mandolin or something. I think that was so, but Bub tried, and so Mike Bub just really helped me so much when I was in Nashville. He's just such an amazing connector of people, and he actually ended up, connecting me with Sean Camp. This is, like before that. Anyway, I ended up out in Rocky Grass with Sean Camp, great songwriter. He's the guitar player with the Earls of Leicester and a fantastic singer songwriter, guitar player, fiddler in his own right out of Nashville. And I was playing his band out in Colorado, and Peter was there, and we ended up at a party, and we just played, for the first time, and we just, pretty much instantly realized we were, both Monroe freaks, like to a very, significant degree. Like we're a lot alike, how much we're just kind of,
Yeah, your style fits him like a kindred spirit.
yeah, and he's been my maestro, and he's been very patient with me in many different regards, with my just maturation process as a person and a band member and as a singer. When I first started playing with him, I was good at playing fast and singing loud. Well, I was, I don't know if I was good at singing loud, but I was in. I sang loud, and he was at that time he was into playing slow and singing softly, and so it was just like, whoa, way out of my element here. But yeah, so we jammed there, and then he came to Nashville and made his the old school record for Compass Records, produced by Allison Brown, and he got me in on two or three of those and played my first gig with him at Cumberland Caverns, 333 feet inside the earth there at McMinnville, Tennessee. And then after that was in the bluegrass band. Of course, he's got all these different ensembles he plays with. He's got the Los Tex Maniacs, and he's got his kind of
Yeah.
more rock and roll band, and he's does a solo thing, and then went to Australia two or three times, and yeah, and recorded the Carter Stanley's Eyes, a couple 3 years ago, and I just if you know you could just name like one or two of Peter's main accomplishments. It's like you write Midnight Moonlight, you're like a legend. or
So
you
true.
write Walls of Time and you're a legend, or
So true.
you
How
write
good is that?
Pantheon
How good
Red.
is that song? How good is that Walls of Time?
Oh gosh, it's it's ethereal,
Gives me
and
goosebumps.
yeah, yeah, it's and so he's got all of these like legendary songs. He's done all this cool stuff and like the Jerry stuff and the Grisman stuff. And go ahead.
Can I ask you a question about though
Yeah.
when you do Walls of Time? Do you put that flat seven chord in there after the four like Ricky does, or what's your preference?
Let's see. Sometimes. Yeah,
It's
sometimes.
like some people put a
But
four and
no
then a flat
five
seven.
until the end.
Right. That is, yeah, exactly. It's that. It's like a magical four chord. It goes to the four in such this really interesting way. It's like one of the most interesting one four changes I've ever heard in my life.
Oh, totally. Yeah, they really got it going with that. But the thing that fascinates me, like one of the most fascinating things about Peter, that's a lot like Dylan, is that he just keeps changing, and like he's way ahead of the curve. He's way ahead of like pretty much everybody. And I mean, in a way, like he's way into the future. He's been way into the future. Like he in a large way invented jamgrass. Jamgrass only caught on in like the last like 20 years. He was there like
Wow.
30 years, but he was there 50 years ago. Like he is
Wow.
jamgrass. Like of course Sam Bush and John Hartford.
I was just gonna say, I think a lot of people credit that to Sam.
Yeah, well, I mean, like there's the new grass, but like when you think about like Vassar and like the extended solos and all that kind of stuff, I know a lot of that can definitely point back to Peter with
For sure.
Midnight Moonlight and the Land of the Navajo and all that kind of stuff with Grisman. And it was a few people, but I don't think there's anybody who was more I mean, I think there's a difference between newgrass and jamgrass
For sure.
for
And yeah, oh yeah, that this is a whole separate podcast conversation. Is like bluegrass, newgrass, jamgrass. My personal tastes are always changing. Like like what I actually like. My ear has changed so much, Chris, over the years. It's almost hard for me to listen to a bunch of like meandering solos, and that's something that I cut my teeth on for endless endless jams till the sun came up for decades at this point.
yeah.
Playing endless solos and stuff, and it's like there's so much to music, to bluegrass, to jamgrass. There's so much stuff going on in there, and it's like that's a never ending conversation.
Indeed, indeed. But just I'll wrap up what I was saying about Peter and changing, like and I believe it's worked for him and it's worked against him because like festival promoters don't really know exactly what they're going to get when Peter Rowan shows up or who's going to be with him or what he's going to be doing, what the style is going to be, what the vibe's going to be, all that kind of stuff. He's unpredictable. But then like and he's done like the reggae Billy, like super legit, like in Kingston, like which is just amazing. And then like it's like 2 albums ago he did the Dharma Blues, and to me Dharma Blues is just like super revolutionary. um a bit, it's a bit subtle unless you know what you're like looking at. And he's a very devout Buddhist, and into the bodhisattva lifestyle, and he bridged the gap between Tibetan Buddhism and bluegrass. And we toured a little bit with Yongchen Lamo, who's the amazing like kind of premier. Of course, they're I guess all in I don't know what's called. I don't know what you call it, like when you can't like live in the country you're from. It's not exile, but it's like anyway. She can't live in Tibet, but she's amazing. They had a great collaboration, and so he's bridging the gap between Buddhism and bluegrass in like a super beautiful way. And I just of course the record came out, and like and maybe not a lot of people know about it, but to me that is like just like of course I'm kind of interested in those same kind of things, but
You
uh
sure are.
for him to be able to do that so well, um and he just moves on. Then his next album was like Aloha, and it was like Hawaiian music. Not but he did a lot of that song. All the songs came out of his personal practice, but that was really influential on me. And I just love that that he's like that as an artist, and he's like, I'll do this. By the time you start figuring out that it's awesome, I'll be on to something else. I'll do
Yeah.
something else. You might not like it. It's just, he's very like Dylan in that way, just like constantly changing, and people are like, what are you doing? And like, so anyway, that's my.
I couldn't agree with more of everything you said about Pete Rowan. My friend Catherine, who we play together at the folk opera, she loves Peter Rowan, one of her favorite bluegrass vocalists, or even just songwriters in general. She's always blown away to see him at the Swanee, no matter how many, because he's always playing at the Swanee. But every single time, she's like, "We got to go see Peter Rowan right now."
Oh yeah, yeah. Always a lot to learn from Peter, and he's like he's a super humble cat, and I love that. One of my favorite things about him is that he'll wear his humility just right on the sleeve, and so like he'll go for a solo or whatever, and like he might miss a note or whatever, or like he might like stumble when he's like telling a story or something like that, but he works it into the flow, and the mistake ends up can often end up becoming one of your most favorite things.
Yeah, he's a master at that.
And to me, that's just like, when your mistakes like end up being like some of the best stuff, then you're just like, that's the top level.
I would say that you're kind of like that too. You're not afraid of a, not only not afraid of a mistake, you'll easily put a mistake onto a record or a video or recording. It's not important to you to play a perfect take, and in fact, that's those slight little what I don't you might think are imperfections or not is what's giving it its kind of untouchable kind of sound, which
Well,
a lot of musicians are missing that, and your playing is just full of so much emotion and so much amazingness that whatever little buzz on the string, it's adding to the overall effect of it to me.
yeah, I appreciate that. There can be a certain amount of like dirt or grit or earthiness, to a point, that can work for you. Do I like, do I
Can I
go
say
for
though
it?
that only works if you're a master? Because like what I'm not saying is that you can be a average musician and record something sloppy and expect it to be genius. It doesn't quite work that way. To me, you have to be a complete world class master of timing, tone, space, the the whole cosmic overall arching theme of music that you've put your whole life into learning and soaking in to be able to make a mistake and make it magical. There. If I don't know if that makes any sense, but I hope people don't get the wrong idea that you can just slop your way through a song and expect it to be the slop to be awesome, because that's not quite what's happening there.
Well, people see and hear with quantum eyes, and beauty is in the eye or the ear of the beholder, and it's just constantly fascinating, how people like different things for different reasons. It's like I remember when I would listen to the Stanley Brothers, like when I was like 11, 12 years old, and I hear that scratchy fiddle and be like, oh gosh, I don't like that, and that ended up being some of my favorite stuff. Just that it's like some of the stuff that you don't like at first, again, can grow on you. But I do I do appreciate I suppose sometimes more than others. It's everybody's kind of like I suppose always wrestling a bit with their humanity, but but I appreciate it, and I often do bank on it. But I appreciate everything you're saying there. Thank you.
That's awesome. And Catherine and I also feel that watching you play with Red, this is father son relationship goals. If only everyone could take out of music and life and even family what you guys have together and share. It's very special, man. What the relationship you guys have musically and otherwise.
No, I appreciate that a lot. I've sure been missing getting down to the festivals to play with him, but we've been able to get up to Virginia, a couple times, and play some, and hope to be doing some more. We've definitely you know had 20 good years of the Northern Florida folk festivals, Will McLean and Florida Folk Festival, and Gamble Rogers, and definitely so grateful for all of that. Red, he's just a you know he's just amazing. He's kind of like he kind of defies like you can't really understand what it's like unless you're actually there with him. and it's happening to feel like, the power. It's like you can watch it on a video and like you kind of get an idea, but like he's just so big, and his energy, his musical energy is so big. Like when you're right next to him, it is like, it's like, whoa, it can be very intimidating.
He must be very proud of your career as a mandolin player.
I think so. Of course, I was just trying to, do what he did, and kind of, take up where, where he left off, and in some ways, and I knew that I would never be able to play like as consistently, intensely as he um, did, and but just trying to find my own way, and he's just, he's really, he's definitely been super supportive. Yeah.
That's amazing. I always love picking with you and your dad at the festivals, and it was very formative meeting you guys back at the folk festival. Going back to the beginning of this interview here, but it was a very formative picking with you guys back then. There was no YouTube, there was no internet, there was no iPhones. You just met people like your dad in the campground, picked with them.
Analog.
And pardon?
Analog.
Yeah, totally.
Totally analog.
I remember picking with him the first time, and he sent me home with the Bluegrass Mandolin and Other Trouble CD.
Yeah,
And I
yeah.
listened to that on the way home from the Folk Fest, and it's amazing, man. It's still, I mean, there's a lot of great players. We're now in our 40s. Life moves on, but I've still yet to hear people play, no matter how hot these young players are. I haven't really ever heard anyone play it like your dad, or that people that play it like that.
No, no.
There's something on it that a lot of
It's,
the a lot of cats are missing. I don't think it can be taught. I don't know where it comes from.
no, I mean, it's some of it has to do with with just that Dragon Force fire, like forging that Monroe had, that like, if you were like, that's what I want, like if you spend like, the thousands of hours, going after it, that's what it takes, and he definitely did that, and was like, all the Monroe stylists, they kind of have their own, like, everybody has their niche, like, Frank Wakefield's kind of like this, like kind of tweaky kind of thing. It's like real tweaky, and then like, David McLaughlin's like the cleanest, and like Ronnie McCurry like bridges the gap to like pop music, and Compton's like, super bluesy like down south, and then Red is just like intensity. And he's got some, he's not all like intensity. He's got some swingy, like some Jethro like cool influences in there, but it's like Monroe, like he had this, big range, and Red's like, I'll have the top of that and I'll extend it.
Yeah,
And he had that like the Randy Wood mandolin, which was like, Bill's mandolin on steroids.
he's even got a little dog in him. You can hear a little dog influence in a lot of those tunes also.
Well, I think
Or
that
maybe dog got it from Red.
I think that a lot of those guys were drinking from the same well, like Dog and Sam Bush and Red. I think that, I know that Sam influenced Red a bit, and probably, Grisman too, and it could have been, all, kind of swirling together there. But those guys were all, into Monroe. They were all into like Jethro. I know that Sam was. I'm just guessing that that Grisman was into some of that too. But I think they're probably all, open-minded, and listening to a good bit of, swing and jazz. And so it's like, it's a little bit like, what's that, like, I don't know if this is exactly right, like the 100th monkey syndrome or whatever, like, where monkeys
Yeah,
like figure out how to do this thing on this side of the island, and then all of a sudden the monkeys on the other side of the island start doing it too, but they didn't have any contact. You know what I mean? It's like they figure out how to open the nut with the rock or whatever, but it's not like those guys taught this guy. It's just like they all figured it out at the same time.
absolutely.
Yeah. So I think there was a lot of good, you know, interplay between those energies back in the late 70s. I mean, I've never heard any, like, there are very few composers. When you're talking about, like, super good composers from the 70s, like, Wakefield, Grisman, Sam Bush, Bill Monroe, of course, and Red, like, in that kind of, world, it's like really prolific. Like, they wrote lots of tunes that were all good.
Yeah,
There are not many of them. I can't really think of one more off the top of my head. And of course, it's, Herschel Sizemore was writing stuff, but I'm kind of, progressive.
Yeah, he was like a progressive player. Absolutely.
Yeah,
Sizemore.
yeah. But I'm glad that you can appreciate that about
Oh yeah.
Red. You've got to see him in his natural element and all that.
Yeah, it's been an honor all these years to know him at such a personal level, such an influential character, man. Like in my life for sure.
Well, let's circle back to your back to your teaching. So you've been doing uh a lot of online teaching in the pandemic.
I have I can't imagine what we'd be doing if there wasn't this technology over this whole virus thing, but I have been doing tons of online teaching, more than even in person. I'm teaching lessons in Germany, South America, different states and countries. It's been super rewarding, and the way I've been able to pull that off is with our buddy Marcel, who, if you're watching this on YouTube and you're a bluegrass fan or a bluegrass guitar fan, you've probably come across lessons with Marcel. He's been doing it about 6 years now. Have you actually seen any of his videos?
I may have looked at one. I can't remember. I think I checked it out when I found out that you were collaborating with him.
Right on. He does a great job. Super nice guy, talented guy. He has that philosophy of doing it right. How many people have taught music before? Lots. How many of them look at all the small little things, customer service, presentation, the whole thing put together? He's got that part down. He's a real master of his craft,
Counts for a
and
lot.
it really does. And we met online. He actually followed my stuff from Flat Picking Magazine,
Hmm.
and he left a comment like, I put a couple licks on YouTube. It's not my main thing teaching on YouTube, but I have a few random lessons on there. And on one of my lessons, he's like, "Isn't that the lick that you played on your third pass of Whiskey Before Breakfast in the 2016 Flat Picking Guitar Magazine at like 3 minutes and 24 seconds? That's the lick, right?" It's not very often that someone nerdy picks out a lick that I played on some fiddle tune from years ago. It's not, it doesn't happen a lot.
That's pretty
So
amazing. Oh,
and I'm like, by golly, it is the lick that I played on that article. And so we've been friends ever since. And he's a fan, I guess. If I have a fan, Marcel would be one. I have a fan. And so we started working together and teaching together, and it's been really fun and rewarding to work with him. And I think he would say the same. So it's we share a lot of love for a lot of the same things.
so how do folks find out about how to connect with you?
Yeah. Well, you can certainly find me on all social media platforms like Facebook and Instagram and things like that. The band that I play with is called Bell and the Band, which you've seen us play a lot of festivals. That's Belle and the band. You can find me at that website. Or if you watch this video, you can just contact Chris, send him a message, be like, "How do I find Mickey?" But we have also a Facebook page for the folk opera. If you want to keep up with that kind of stuff, totally separate than the Bell and the Band Facebook. We've created a whole new one just for folk opera. So when that takes off and goes crazy, people can just follow just the folk opera by itself. And for lessons with Marcel, they can go to his website. And I have a little spot where you click on teachers. And hey, do you know Andy Hatfield?
The name sounds familiar. I can't place it off the top of my head.
Killer mandolin player, but he's mostly known as a guitar player. He won Winfield, probably on mandolin also, but definitely on guitar.
Hmm.
And he's also working with Marcel and I. He's gosh, what a tasty player.
Yeah.
Uh,
So when are we thinking the folk opera is going to be any ETC estimated time of completion, or just kind of
yeah, now I think we're thinking by the end of this school year. I would like to say by Christmas,
Hmm.
but still with artwork and mixing and mastering and getting all the vocalists into the studio. I think we're thinking turn that ringer off. We're thinking probably by the end of the school year.
Excellent, excellent. Well, definitely, I know that a lot of people, myself included, are looking forward to the premiere and the debut, and I hope I can, at least get to see some video of some of the live performances. I just want to I want to kind of wrap us up here with some good Mickey philosophy. I think that one of the things that I think that you told me that your dad told you this years ago. And for some reason, it just always stuck with me, just because it was so simple and so wise, and such a just a little bite-sized nugget of practical.
I can't wait to hear what this is going
Um,
to be.
advice. Uh, and here's what it was. He said, if you want to be interesting, be interested.
That's your dude. That's it. My dad did tell me that.
And I just think that, I think you got a real good way with people, and it's, it's a love language of sorts. It's a way to, to connect with people, to be interested, and, as a byproduct, you end up being interested, because especially when it's genuine. And I feel that you are a genuine person, that that loves people, and loves to obviously loves the music, but just loves to, to connect and share the good vibes. And I always have appreciated that about you a whole lot, brother.
Thanks, Chris. That means the world, man. Coming from someone who I also think is an extremely genuine person, and really easy to talk to and interesting. You're a super interesting guy, and it's been an honor hearing your philosophies over the years.
Well, I
Um,
appreciate that, bro. I look forward to many. Go ahead.
Two of my favorite videos that you've ever made was the one on don't put minor chords into bluegrass songs. I show that to a lot of my students, if not to take seriously,
uh,
just to they understand the importance of the 1 4 5 and why
yeah,
this is different than adding other chords.
yeah,
What's the
it
deal
works.
behind it? Like it's if you haven't seen it, go to Chris's Facebook, search through all his videos, you'll find it. It's great. You should put that one on YouTube.
Oh,
It's
you're
it's
probably right. You're
it's
probably right.
really good. And one that I don't really comment. A lot of people, you have these like never ending runs of people talking about music or religion or politics. That's not me. I'm not one to put volumes of books on Facebook. But one time I replied to one of your videos was when you were doing the thing on playing the melody. And while that is so important, and there's no substitute for melodic playing, I was thinking, you know what? I could go the opposite if I wanted to play devil's advocate, which is that all classical players play the melody, they play what's in front of them. But what makes a bluegrass player or a blues player or a jazz player or funk or anything other than classical, what makes them that way is that they do have a G lick. It could be different. Monroe's G lick is different than Jimi Hendrix's G lick, different than BB King's G lick. Everyone has their own G lick. But if you don't have a G lick or an E lick or something, you're not really playing the music correctly in some way, because you're expected to know how to do that. So, for example, on like the Lonesome Fiddle Blues, for example, I feel that the B part doesn't really have a melody. And if you don't know how to play a G lick or a D lick, even if it's one note, even if your lick is just the root played with a lot of intensity, you need that. You can't just rely on melody all the time. And so, yes, it's important, but there's a time and a place to also be a master of improvising over chords.
I feel you there, and I'm not sure Vassar would agree with there not being a melody for the B part,
Well, I wonder
but
what he would say.
he'd probably be like, it goes like this. But I suppose my main point of making that video, I think was kind of two points. Was the first is that people have the modern generation has lost the ability to play simple melodies well from too many licks, from playing too many licks, relying on them, and the music becomes, largely homogenized when there isn't that like reliance on every song really sounding different. And if it's just like the same licks in every song without like a really, clear commitment to making each song, like, and like Bill Monroe is an interesting example, because like he was a melody guy, but he would play like the most abstract thing like anyone had ever thought of. No one ever even thought of anything that abstract until he did it the first time, in a way. And so like, he was breaking his own rules all the time, but he could do both of those things, and he knew when to do both things. And so it's like, uh, the the thing that bugs me is when like good players, like who are like some of the more advanced players, are playing like classic tunes, and they're getting the melodies wrong when they're
Yeah.
actually trying to play the melody. It's like they're missing. It's like they might hit a right like arpeggio note, but it's not the right melody note. and it's like, whoa, it's like, how are you missing that? Like, and it's because they're not practicing, like, relying on the importance of the melody, and they're just kind of banking off of their, their lick catalog, which is just the modern culture. And so that's one of the reasons. Those are probably the two reasons that I got on the soapbox. But
Sure, you were probably just referring to people that just plaster Tony Rice G licks over every bluegrass song in G without any nod to what the melody of that song might even be, because that's a whole genre unto itself. Just
yeah,
play hot Tony Rice G licks over the whole song.
yeah. And that can, and that can be, fun and all. But yeah, I think that, with bluegrass, especially traditional bluegrass, it can, the purity can really get watered down, has gotten watered down a lot. And so, but when you kind of wave that melody flag, then people are like, oh yeah, you're kind of right about that. You might not be right about everything, or I might not like the way you're saying it, but there's something in there that I like, and I'm going to think about it.
So true. Hey, I could bring our whole conversation full circle for the end here, going back to going to the folk fest with your grandmother.
Yeah.
Um, we never even added to that story. It wasn't just me and her that rode there together. It wasn't like I just happened to hitch a ride with her,
Yeah.
because we forgot to even mention how that happened. Is she was good friends with Gordon and Jane, with Jane Scott, and your grandmother Renee Henry lived in Tallahassee, and which is where I live and worked at the time at the Bluegrass store. And the people that I worked for, they were going to the folk festival. I was a college kid. I had never been to the folk festival before, and so I was hitching a ride as a college kid with the folks I was working for, and they happened to pick up Renee on the way to the folk festival. They're like, "We're gonna pick up our friend." So in came Renee Henry. So I'm heading to the folk festival with Gordon Scott, Jane Scott, and Renee Henry, and then
Mhm.
somehow ended up meeting you. I don't even know how. And then we somehow, hey, I came from Tallahassee. I'm here with Gordon and Jane. I know Gordon and Jane Scott. Oh, I rode here with your grandmother.
That's right. Renee was an amazing connector, and I appreciate you circling back to her, man. Well, it has been a pleasure to spend this hour with you, brother, and
It
thank you
certainly has.
for sharing, what you've been up to, and let's stay in touch. And folks, yeah, give a holler to Mickey if you're looking for good mandolin, guitar instruction, and if you need somebody to help with your folk opera, I'm sure he could be able to help you there too.
Yeah, people out there are probably, if they made it this far into our conversation, they've probably already wondered what in the world is a folk opera. Well, just wait. I promise you won't be disappointed. It's amazing.
That's right. That's right. Looking for that's gonna be a big deal when it comes out. And I'm real proud of y'all for the fundraiser and just the dedication that it takes to keep the production on track. That's a lot.
Thanks, Chris. You too. Keep doing everything you're doing, man.
I appreciate it, brother. Lots of love. We'll talk to you soon.
You got it.
Peace.
Peace.